Welcome to part 6 of module 7, which is motivation, emotion, and personality. This is going to be a very short section, but we're going to be looking at expressing emotion. Now, in class, we'll do a little bit more. We'll actually look at emotions and we'll kind of define them and then pick apart the different things that tell us what emotion it actually is. But we're kind of skip that in the video, so we're just going to look at some of the points that we'll talk about a little bit later on. So our first thing to look at is just talking about detecting emotion in others. So when we're looking at other people, one of the things that's really important for us as humans is to be able to look at other people and understand and detect the emotions that they're feeling based on how they look. Now, there's a lot of different things that we would look at, but one of the biggest ones, one of the most important, is their eyes. So we pull a ton of different information, a ton of content about their emotion from someone's eyes. This is often why the eyes are called the window to the soul, because we naturally we have this natural ability to pull that out of other people. Now, we also know that the ability of people to read emotions differs from person to person. So we actually see that introverts are better at detecting emotions, and extroverts, though, have emotions that are easier to read. So people who are extroverted, their emotions are more visible. It's easier for other people to read them. Introverts, though, are actually better at detecting other people's emotions, at reading other people's emotions. Now, we also know that we actually detect negative emotions quicker than positive ones. And this actually probably serves a pretty good purpose. If you think about, again, if we talk about evolution, right, it does make sense that we would want to be able to read negative emotions quicker, right? If someone is coming up to me and they look happy, there's not really anything I need to be worried about happening. But if someone's coming up to me and they look angry, that's something that I need to be able to notice right away, to detect right away, because I might need to respond to that, right, to protect myself. So being able to detect emotions is really important, but specifically being able to detect negative ones is a big deal. And that might be why we actually read these quicker. We are able to pick them up faster. We also see that the people's environment and their life affects how they read emotions, how quickly they read emotions, what they see in other people's emotions. So, for example, people who have been abused are more biased towards seeing aggression. Now, the way that they find this, and I don't think I have any of these examples in the slides, but what they can do is they can take photos of people doing different emotions, and what they can do is merge them together. So basically, on one side, maybe you have happiness, and the other side you have anger, or you've got sadness or something like that. And what they do is, as we move, let's say happiness is over here and anger is over here. So we'd have maybe 10 pictures. This side is 100% happiness, 100% anger. And this picture, right, you add another one in the middle, and this one is 90% happy, 10% anger. And then 80% happy, 20% anger, and then 70-30, and on and on and on. When we do this with different people, what we'll see is people who have been abused will read aggression earlier than people who haven't. So they'll see aggression when it's, I'm just making up a number now, when it's 70% happiness, they'll see that 30% aggression in there, or that 30% anger, where somebody else maybe wouldn't. So they're more likely to be seeing that in other people's emotions. They're biased towards it. Now, we also know that there are certain facial muscles that can be very revealing to us when we look at emotions. So one of the things we could ask is, why, how can people, because people can hide their emotions, obviously. You can fake a smile, or you can fake sadness or whatever. But there are actually things in our the way our faces are constructed and the muscles in our face that actually can reveal those. And this is what is called a micro expression. We're not going to go super deep in this. We're just going to talk about kind of the general idea of micro expressions. But it's basically the idea that when you fake a certain emotion, you're not actually using all of the same facial muscles that you would if it was a real emotion. So a really simple example is this image right here on the left. So I'm going to give you a few moments to look at it. All you need to do is tell me which one of those images is a real smile, which one of them is showing real happiness. So the answer is the one on the left. This one right here, I'll point out to make sure it's the same side. This one right here. And if you look at it, the difference is actually in the eyes. The mouth is pretty much the same, but what we're seeing is kind of a contraction in these muscles in the eyes. People kind of squint a little bit when they're smiling. Their eyes kind of squint a little bit, and that's what we're seeing. And this would be an example of that micro expression. So we can tell, and this is why you can see this sometimes when you look at people smile. Sometimes you can tell when it's a fake smile or when they're actually feeling happiness. Okay, so that's kind of an example of what you're seeing there. Now, in addition to this, there are also other things that affect our ability to read emotions. And one of the big ones is context and culture. So the first piece is just that or I shouldn't say some, but kind of our basic 5 emotions are considered universal. So if you go to any country in the world and you smile at somebody, that is considered that you're showing the same emotion, you're showing the same thing, right? And again, those big 5 are the same across the world. Smiling or happiness, anger, sadness, disgust, fear, those are all going to be considered these kind of universal emotions that everyone experiences. Now, that being said, if we are, going through studies and we're actually trying to label emotions, we are more accurate at labeling the emotions of people that are from our own culture. So if you grew up in, Southern Africa, as you're labeling people, you're going to do better at labeling other people from Southern Africa, from South Africa. If I'm from Asia, I'm going to be, let's be more specific, if I'm from Japan, I'm going to be better at labeling the emotions of people from Japan. Now, I'm still going to be able to see, if there's somebody from the US and they're smiling really big, I'm still going to be able to tell that that's happiness. But again, if we were kind of mixing emotions up a little bit and we're making them kind of a combination, I'm going to be more accurate when it comes to people from my own culture. So there is kind of this cultural context that has to go with emotions and how they're presented. We also know that there's a context culture, or context clues that we use. So if we look at these bottom images here, when you look at those, it's probably pretty clear the 3 emotions that you're seeing, right? We have, I have to go back 1 second. We have disgust, right? We have sadness, and we have anger. Now, the important thing about that is even though you can see these 3 different emotions, the face is exactly the same. This is the exact same face in every single one of these images. It's actually just photoshopped in. So all that's changing is the context in which you're seeing that face. So again, these context clues are also important. And it is also important to understand that we don't just use facial expressions to understand emotions. Obviously, there's a lot of other body context and our physical movements and our presence and our tone and all those other things are also going to be used, but the facial expressions are the main one. But again, that context can be used to kind of adjust and say, okay, I understand this face, what's going on here, based also on the context around it. It's not necessarily just the facial expression itself. The last 2 pieces are looking at how facial expressions and physical behavior affects our emotions. Now, there is a little bit of debate as to how much this actually is impactful, or if it's really something that's a very solidly supported psychological fact or not. So there is a little debate on this one, but in general, these 2 things, at least at this point, kind of seem to be relatively true. So our first one is what is called facial feedback effect. So facial feedback effect is the tendency of facial muscle states to trigger corresponding feelings such as fear, anger, or happiness. So this is actually what we're seeing on the image in the left there. So on the right side of that image, she's holding a pencil between her teeth, and what you have to do to hold a pencil between your teeth is you have to pull your lips back, right, into a kind of smile. Okay, that's the idea. You have to go like this to smile. Now, in this image, she's actually really smiling. You can see in her eyes that she's actually smiling there a little bit. But the idea is that by doing this, it actually will make me feel happier. You can see the same thing, or the opposite side of it in the other picture next to it. where if I'm holding it with my lips, it requires me to basically frown my mouth down, and you can do this, you can feel it, and that would make me feel more sadness. Okay, so the way that the actual facial expressions we make can trigger those emotions. Now, again, there is kind of some debate. There was like a really big thing, I think it was in a TED Talk actually, where they talked about power poses, and how if you pose in a certain way, it actually changes your physiology to make you feel more confident. And the reality was they found out that that wasn't actually true, that the research didn't actually back it up. So again, there is a little bit of like gray area here where we're not quite sure 100%, but this, at least right now, is something that they would be looking for you to say if we were asking on the AP Psych test. We also, again, have what's called behavior feedback effect. Now, behavior feedback effect is a little bit different, but it's the same idea. The difference here is that it's looking at a specific behavior as opposed to the muscles in our face. So what this basically says is that the tendency of behavior, we have a tendency for our behavior to actually influence our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. So when I behave a certain way, or when I carry out certain behaviors, it actually causes me to think differently and to feel differently, and then obviously act differently as well. And in addition to it affecting how we think, feel, and act, it also affects how other people think, feel, and act. I think kind of like an example of this could actually be, and maybe this ties in both, but an example of this can be when you smile at somebody. When you're walking down the street or the hallway or whatever, and you see someone and you smile at them. That's a physical behavior that you're carrying out, but it changes how you feel, it changes how you act, it changes your thoughts. It also does that for that other person, right? When someone smiles at you, it kind of makes you feel good. So we can see how these behaviors actually affect emotions as well. It's not kind of in a totally separate from what we do ourselves. All right, and that wraps up this section. Like I said, it's very short. Just take a few moments and do a quick summary, and I'll see you guys next time.